Welcome to NSSA Charlotte's first online webinar. Today we will be speaking about climate change, its impacts, and several solutions.
So here at NSSA Charlotte, we typically focus on catering towards environmental sustainability. However, NSSA overall plans on increasing accessibility and unifying people through giving the youth resources. So this is our officer team. I'm your president, Harshini Baluthu.
I'm your Vice President, Ellen Way.
I'm Hannah Rogers. I'm the secretary.
And our social media manager, Aditi, is not here today, but she is on the right.
Now, what is climate change? Climate change is long-term shifts in weather and temperature patterns and harmful activities from humans that have caused climate change to accelerate uncontrollably. This is known as global warming. Global warming is caused by the greenhouse effect and greenhouse gases being released into the atmosphere. It causes a rise in temperature and unstable precipitation patterns.
So this diagram kind of shows how global warming exactly works. So as you can see, solar radiation that comes from the sun hits Earth's surface and that warms it. Now, usually it's bouncing off the surface and it reflects back into space, which prevents unnecessary warming. However, because of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, and fluorinated gases, some of these rays are re-radiated back to the surface, as you can see by those arrows. Now, when they hit the surface again, that warms the surface more. So as they keep bouncing, that creates a warming effect that only warms the conditions on Earth.
So since the beginning of the industrial era, there's been a lot of things that have caused global warming. That includes factory emissions and the other causes I'm going to talk about here. So generating energy through burning fossil fuels is probably one of the biggest causes for global warming. And manufacturing goods, cutting down forests, using transportation that uses fossil fuels, producing food, powering infrastructure and utilities, as well as overconsumption are all causes of global warming.
Now we're going to talk about the effects of climate change.
Now, one of the main effects and also one of the most well-known effects is rising sea levels. Now, this is caused when higher temperatures cause glaciers to melt, and this has three main impacts: the loss of polar habitats, the loss of wetland habitats, and the loss of aquatic plants worldwide. As you can see on the image on the right, melting glaciers directly impact the habitats of many species like polar bears, seals, Arctic foxes, and more. Now, these species are important keystone species in the Arctic ecosystems. So with the loss of these populations comes the loss and collapse of the entire food web. This is very bad for Earth's biodiversity. Now, as the glaciers melt, they cause a rise in sea levels. Now, this rise in sea level can submerge many low-lying coasts and wetlands. These habitats are important ecological hubs, housing thousands of species that depend on them for food, shelter, reproduction, and more. Now, rising sea levels also prevents many aquatic plants worldwide from getting the sunlight that they need to survive. As water levels rise, it becomes harder and harder for sunlight to reach where the plants are on the bottom. And since plants aren't mobile like many animals, their populations will decline. Because plants are the producers and base of all food webs, a decline in their populations means a decline in every single other organism's populations, which again is terrible for the biodiversity of these ecosystems.
So eutrophication is probably one of the greatest effects that global warming has on our society. So eutrophication occurs due to climate change, and it usually happens when there's unstable precipitation patterns, which increases the runoff of sediments and nutrients into water. So when you get extra nutrients from that excess runoff, and then you add it to warmer water, you're gonna get like an algae breeding ground. And that's what really causes this green pigmentation in this picture here. So algae and sediments blanket bodies of water and block sunlight, which is also what kills biodiversity and other animals as well within the bodies of water. So due to increased salinity, that allows the same toxic marine algae to move to freshwater ecosystems, killing fish. So this really goes to say that the algae breeding grounds have a negative impact on biodiversity in regions of water because it blocks off sunlight, which kills off the major plant habitats within a region of water. So, and then when the algae dies, the ecosystems are left a barren wasteland.
Coral reef Coral bleaching is another horrible effect of climate change. Coral reefs are very biodiverse, and they're so biodiverse that 25% of marine species depend on them to survive and live. The increase of water temperatures, water level, sedimentation, and acidification is actively killing the algae that their coral needs to continue to live voraciously. The bleached coral reefs almost never recover, and the ones that do take decades to do so. Overall, biodiversity in regards to coral reefs have declined more than 60% in the past 80 years. These two pictures on the left and right depict the same coral reef just a couple of years apart. As you can see, the coral reef on the right has been completely bleached, devoid of life. There are no organisms that have survived. It is barren.
Now, another issue that impacts coral reefs that is caused by climate change or impacted by climate change is invasive species. So invasive species are categorized as species who generally grow fast, reproduce fast, and eat almost anything. Global warming is tied to this because changing environments cause some species to move out of their natural ranges. For example, the lionfish. These are normally native to the Indian Ocean, but because of rising water temperatures caused by global warming, they've moved to the Atlantic. Now, let's look at the lionfish as a key example. Lionfish are covered in venomous spines, so many of the predators in the Atlantic aren't adapted to eat them. And as you can see by this image, a single lionfish can consume many small fish within a small amount of time. So all of these factors combined, we have fast growing, they reproduce a lot, they eat a lot, and the native predators can't control their populations. That means that they'll overpopulate and consume all prey, which causes other competing predator species that are native to the area to starve. Another example of a harmful invasive species is cheatgrass, which is invasive to the US. Now, it normally is native to Eurasia and the Mediterranean, but it's removed here. Now, cheatgrass greens and seeds before native species, which gives it an advantage in terms of soil and nutrition and space. Now, this is an issue mainly because cheatgrass is not like the other grasses. Well, it holds less water in its blades, dries out faster, and burns easier, which makes it a catalyst for more frequent and intense wildfires in our forests.
So speaking of wildfires, it's important to consider that higher temperatures plus invasive species like cheatgrass lead to more frequent and intense fires. So other factors are unstable precipitation patterns and heat waves and droughts. So fires kill organisms and lead to a lack of biodiversity in that region of land. So this also leaves soils sterile and unstable, which means more erosion and sedimentation is more likely to occur in that region of land. It's also harder for plants to grow back due to the lack of nutrients that has once been depleted due to the wildfire. Now, this also means that there's a lack of fertilization in that area. And wildfires can also return carbon to the atmosphere as trees are burned. So this has more of an impact on the greenhouse effect.
Increased extreme weather is another result of the Earth getting warmer and warmer day by day. It's where temperatures rise and then the moisture evaporates, which results in extreme rainfall and flooding and more destructive storms. The frequency of tropical storms is affected by the warming ocean. So deadly storms such as cyclones, hurricanes, and typhoons, they feed on warm water at the ocean's surface. So the warmer the ocean water gets, the more frequently these storms will occur. This also leads to scarcer water for humans and animals alike. Water shortages result in the increased risk of agricultural droughts. These affect crops and result in ecological droughts. These droughts also cause destructive sand and dust storms, which is very harmful for the organisms in those ecosystems, and they cause deserts to expand, and this reduces land for us to grow food. Along with that, many people are facing the deadly threat of not having enough water to drink or farm.
Now, so far we've more talked about the impacts on the ecosystem, but now let's talk about impacts on society. So changes in climate combined with increases in extreme weather means a global rise in hunger and poor nutrition. Because of this extreme weather, fisheries, crops, and livestock may be destroyed. Ocean acidification can deplete marine resources like seafood that feed billions of people. Now, warming temperatures causes changes in snow and ice cover, which means disrupted food supplies from herding, hunting, and fishing. Heat stress diminishes water and grasslands for grazing, which causes a decline in crop and livestock yields. So that includes the vegetables that you eat, the fruit that you eat, and the meat that you consume. Climate impacts are already harming health through air pollution, disease, extreme weather events, and increased hunger. Every single year, these factors take the lives of around 13 million people. Climate change, in addition to this, increases the factors that put and keep people in poverty. Natural disasters like floods, hurricanes, etc., can destroy urban slums, and heat can make it difficult to work in outdoor jobs. Unfortunately, these jobs are the jobs that people in poverty are most likely to work. Water scarcity may also affect crops, and from 2010 to 2019, weather-related events displaced an estimated 23.1 million people every single year, which leaves that many more vulnerable to poverty.
So now that we've talked about the causes and the effects global warming has on the society and environment, it's time that we talk about some of the solutions. So using renewable energy sources and cutting down on deforestation are probably two of the biggest ways you can help defeat climate change. So solar energy is also well known for how often it can be used and how well known it is for us so far. So solar energy is efficient, so it can be harnessed in even cloudy weather. The rate solar energy is consumed by the Earth is 10,000 times more than the rate that humans would actually consume it. So you can understand that it's never really going to be depleted because it's constantly sourced, and we don't really need to worry about it running out. So in regards to that, solar energy can be used to deliver heat, cooling, natural lighting, electricity, and fuels. So converting sunlight into electrical energy through photovoltaic panels and mirrors that concentrate solar radiation. So those are two specific ways that you could really concentrate solar energy, and whichever way that you pick would, of course, have a significant impact on the community. So the cost of manufacturing has gone down in the past decades. Now, more cost effective than other renewable energy sources. However, it's important to understand that solar energy isn't naturally that reliable because despite the cost going down, it's still kind of expensive and pricey. And alongside that, you can understand that solar panels typically have a lifespan of 30 years, which means that once you make that investment, it will last you a bit. It's also important that you consider that despite being unreliable and expensive, these problems are constantly being fixed.
Another renewable resource that we're trying to utilize to combat climate change is wind energy. Wind energy harnesses the energy of moving air by using large wind turbines located on land or in sea and freshwater. There are onshore and offshore wind energy technologies that have been evolved a lot over the years to maximize the electricity that is produced. They do this by using taller turbines and larger rotor diameters. Average wind speeds will vary depending on the location that they're in, but the potential for wind energy exceeds global electricity production, and most regions have enough wind to power these turbines. Although this source of energy can be very unreliable, along with that, the maintenance is expensive and the wind turbines can hurt animals like migrating birds.
Another source that's widely being considered is geothermal energy, which utilizes the accessible thermal energy from the Earth's interior or its core. So how it works is heat is extracted from geothermal reservoirs, which are essentially pockets of hot water that are heated by the magma underneath our crust. So once this is at the surface, fluids of various temperatures are used to generate electricity through steam. Now, geothermal energy is relatively mature and reliable, and it's been operating for more than 100 years. However, it is rather location specific. For example, Iceland is a geothermal hotspot. It can release some gases that are naturally stored within the earth, but the greenhouse gases that you save by using geothermal offset this. It can also be relatively expensive and cause potential earthquakes, but it's still a good source to consider.
So another renewable energy source that has been understood over the past couple of years is hydropower. So hydropower can be harnessed when the energy of water moving from higher to lower levels is considered. So it's typically generated from either reservoirs or rivers, and reservoir hydropower plants rely on stored water in a reservoir, whereas the runoff river hydropower plants use energy from the available flow of the river. So that's a way that you can distinguish both. And alongside that, hydropower reservoirs typically have multiple uses. So this includes providing drinking water, water for irrigation, flood and drought control, navigation services, as well as energy supply. So this relies on stable rainfall patterns, which is also something that can be a bit of a problem with how unstable precipitation patterns can be. So it's also negatively impacted by climate-induced droughts and changes to ecosystems, which of course impact rainfall patterns. So creating hydropower structures has a profound impact on the environment around it, which is not really an effective way to harness this power in your environment when you're trying to combat climate change. You don't want to cause other problems. So when it comes to dams, a lot of sedimentation occurs, and that's because the level of water is distributed unevenly. So there's way too much water here, way too much water down here, and so there's a lot of sedimentation, which can obviously lead to erosion and other problems in the future. Alongside that, such structures can often cause like disruptions in migration patterns and other ecological disasters.
Nuclear energy is another renewable energy source that has very promising results. It's harnessed by splitting uranium and plutonium atoms in a nuclear reactor. The energy that's released is used to heat water into steam, and that steam turns a turbine, which creates electricity. Investing in nuclear energy has a high initial cost upfront, but it becomes very cheap after that. It's relatively reliable and it produces absolutely no carbon emissions. It also has a high energy density. However, nuclear energy emits toxic and radioactive waste. Alongside that, uranium mining is very harmful to the environment. Also, many plants can cause thermal pollution in nearby waterways by taking in cold water from the waterways and expelling warm water back into the water sources. On top of that, nuclear accidents can destroy environments and crumble societies with the potential of releasing deadly amounts of radiation in the environment that last for hundreds of years after the fact.
Now, ocean energy is something that is being explored currently, but it's not fully utilizable yet. So it comes from technology that uses the kinetic and thermal energy of seawater to produce electricity. While it's still at an early stage of development, there's a number of prototype wave and tidal systems that are currently being explored. Now, this is a good option because ocean energy is very reliable. Like the tides happen every single day without fail. The theoretical potential for ocean energy exceeds present human energy requirements. So what that says is we're not going to run out of this energy.
So another effective way to help combat climate change is through hydrogen fuel cells. So when you take hydrogen and consider it to be the fuel, and then you add oxygen to it, you're going to get electrical energy and water as its products. So the reverse process of this configuration can be done with multiple renewable energy sources. So the byproduct of water is potable. It's important that you consider that when understanding the accessibility and the way that you can use hydrogen fuel cells. So, and these cells are heavily considered for use in vehicles due to how efficient they are with charging. So unlike Tesla cars that take a very long time to charge, when you're using hydrogen fuel cells, you don't really need to worry about that. And as long as you apply it effectively, you don't need to worry that it's not eco-friendly because hydrogen fuel cells are, of course, eco-friendly. And furthermore, hydrogen needs to be extracted, which requires a significant amount of energy, which of course is also another reason that we don't know so much about these cells because they're so expensive to even get our hands on or even try to construct. So this also requires a lot of investment in order for it to become a viable energy source, which is why other renewable energy sources may seem to be the better option, like solar energy for this case. So the precious metals that are used in these cells have really high costs. So in this diagram here, you can see kind of the basic construction of a hydrogen fuel cell. However, if you want to figure out more and understand more on these fuel cells, you could always look it up and you'll learn more. So hydrogen storage and transport is complex. So that means that not everyone can do this. So you need to be knowledgeable in some matter or form and able to understand the installation process of hydrogen fuel cells and their capabilities and uses. So hydrogen is also highly flammable, so it might not always be seen as to be a safe measure that people can do or use, but we are constantly doing our research on these fuel cells to be able to understand how we can incorporate them in our society soon.
So how can you help? Well, one of the main ways and most popular ways and easiest ways that you can help is by speaking up.
To help, you can look into organizations that advocate for climate change. This is an effective way of helping to make a change in your community by getting in touch with other local organizations that have similar visions. Some examples of these organizations are the Climate Initiative, Sustain Charlotte, NC Warren, and NSSA Charlotte.
So now that you understand a general gist of what climate change is and how you can help combat it, it's also important that you understand that public speaking for a cause is what we do here at NSSA Charlotte. So elements for consideration for wanting to get into public speaking include your delivery, your flow, your body language, and of course, who you're catering your speech to, which is your audience. So when it comes to delivery, you want to make sure that your physical and vocal abilities match the tone of your speech. So you want to make sure that the style and structure is efficient and construct in a way where when it's heard by the audience, it's something that stuns them and keeps them engaged, and not something that makes them go to sleep. So the main purpose is to enhance and not to distract. So if you want to enhance and engage someone, maybe you want to use hand gestures, or maybe you have a demo that's going on. You don't want to do something that is distracting. So you don't want to look off somewhere else. You don't want to seem shy, or you don't want to seem like you don't know what you're talking about. Because the goal is, of course, to engage and enhance, not to distract. So it's important to thoughtfully consider both the organization and the style of speech, as I've talked about before. The structure is really important, and how you present it to the audience is also important. So aspects include controlling speech anxiety, vocal variety, so voice modulation, and body language. So these are typically what people would want to work on when they're planning on changing their delivery style or trying to make it better.
When it comes to enhancing flow, you want to make sure to breathe and take pauses at the right times, which are typically at the end of a thought or an idea. You want to talk slow to symbolize confidence and knowledge on the topic that you're talking about. Talking fast can show that you're nervous and unsure of your points of topic. You also want to pronounce your words loudly and speak clearly. You don't want to mumble.
Now, another aspect of this is body language. So your body language communicates meaning just like your words and how you say them. So while you're speaking, you should consider what your body language says about you and your message. Your language and your movement affect the tone of your speech or presentation. It can either gain or lose your audience's attention, and it can communicate whether or not you're confident or insecure. So, for example, if you're slouching over or fiddling with your fingers, you might seem insecure. Whereas if you're standing up straight and very just you know what you're going to talk about, you're confident.
When talking about the audience, you want to identify who the audience is, and you should focus on adapting the speech to their interest, level of understanding, attitudes, and beliefs. An audience centered approach is very important because the speaker's effectiveness to convey their message to the audience will be improved if the presentation is created and delivered in an appropriate and engaging manner for the audience.
To summarize the things that we just went over, it's important to consider the 7 P's of public speaking, which include pronunciation, pace, pause, punch, power, passion, and posture. Thank you so much for attending this webinar, and if you have any more questions, make sure to go to the NSSA website to help email us or talk to us about any other concerns or ways that you would like to help impact your society. Thank you.